I love this crowd, Hemi, Henry shouted. We can be ourselves here, whatever we are. I do so wish the rest of our world was like this. Aye, all the freaks of nature at the centre of things, shouted Billy. For are we not all misfits of nature anyway? Ah, Hemi, what a blessing to have found you. I love you just about as much as I love my girl, and I don't mind saying it. Oh, the great swell in my chest, this great love. I knew in my head it could not be for him what it was for me, but I let myself be seized by what felt like the heat of his gaze. Since I had known myself to love Billy, I had known myself to be as defenseless as any human on earth could be. If I could not have him, I would live out the rest of my days with the sweetness of his proximity in the air between us. Equal parts pain and pleasure, motion and stillness. Oh, Billy Neptune. How the shape of your name writes itself on my very existence, even now. But then, I was fooling myself. And that night, I fooled myself even more than usual. I was making my way to the bar, seeking something not so intoxicating as everything else I had consumed that night, when Billy was suddenly at my side in a worse state than I. He started weaving through the crowd, dragging me with him. And then we were amid the throng, swinging around, feet stomping, legs up, knees bent, arms interlocked, laughing. Henry came in and out of focus. Mr. Antrobus across the room, deep in conversation. It was a swirling bacchanalian spree. We were gloriously alive. Billy had me in his sweaty embrace, leading me around the floor as if I were one of his blushing maids to be seduced. For a moment, everything seemed right and pure. We moved together in rhythm so close that mere breathing filled me with the odor of his heaving body. I was so gloriously submerged in a sea of Billy Neptune. The next moment, I pulled in closer, pushed my body against his from chest to thigh, and closed my open mouth over his, swallowing his laughter. A moment. Less time than it took to count once. I knew immediately, felt his body stiffen and push me away. No, his eyes said. No, the stiff turn of his shoulder and a final look. Then he turned fully away and I looked after him, both of us at the same time, seeing Henry where she stood, her mouth agape, and something stricken, some look that made me think of the brokenness on the faces of those people long ago when I showed them Ruakanapu's greenstone weapon and they knew that he was dead. But this was nothing but a stupid mistake, my stupid mistake. I lifted my arm out to my friend and began to move towards her, but once she understood my intention, she was away. Billy turned back towards me then, his face contorted, fierce. "Don't, Hemi. Leave it." Then he was away too, after her. I was swimming through a bottle when Billy returned. He did not look at me. Mr. Antrobus approached. "Oh, you seem ill at ease, Mr. Pornicky. Can I help?" I found myself telling him I had been inappropriate and offended my friends. He took me to mean I had made advances on Henry, having observed her true identity. I'd offended my best friend, as well as my closest friend, and I did not know what to do to make it up to either of them. Henry would understand when given an explanation. But Billy... I knew not how he would proceed, and my vision of a future devoid of him was dark and desperate. "Go and talk to your friends." Mr. Antrobus tried to lift me from my slouched position. It is all a misunderstanding, and in the morning you will all feel sheepish for it. It is time I return home, James. Go, talk to your friends. All will be fine." He bowed a little and was gone. Shame washed over me in waves. I resolved I must tell Billy immediately. But Billy had his own things to say. "Henry, you Māori wretch," he yelled. "Henry is gone. And it's you to blame, you Nancy." "I'm so sorry, Billy, forgive me. Let me explain. Let us find Henry together." "No. She's gone. Told me to leave her alone. Told me to go away on my damn ships and be done with it. I think she believes it's what I wanted. After all, I went for her in trousers." Billy pointed a finger at me and prodded my chest. "You just stay away from me, Jimmy James. I know what you are. I'd always suspected. Never bothered me, but then you had to go and spoil it, eh? Spoil it for all of us." "Where's my girl?" He swung around and lurched towards the door. I felt I was nothing after all my parading in London. My friends were leaving or already gone. I was bereft, and I had begun to see it was not just people I was missing, but my own centre. I was nearly home when Antrobus found me. But Pornicky, wait! I'm afraid I need your assistance most urgently." His words were oddly careful despite the panic I detected within. "Quickly, please, Hemi." He had not used my first name thus before. At a fast pace, we returned to the river until we were within 4 or 5 streets of the Mermaid's Tail. Mr. Antrobus guided me towards a formidable grey stone building. "I'm afraid it's Billy. He will not move, but he has made his accusation and must come away now." "Accusation?" "Oh, Hemi, it's Henry. There were young gentlemen. They saw Billy with Henry." Antrobus brought me to the entrance of a magistrate's house. No one seemed pleased to see us at this late hour, including Billy himself, who was red in the face and rigid. I had never seen him in such distress. And where was Henry? "Go now, young man, with your associates." The magistrate was stern and dressed only in his dressing gown. "If I may, sir, I'd like your assurance charges will be laid," said Billy. "I can give no such assurance. I will consider the matter in the morning. The gentlemen involved will be questioned. You have identified them. You have intimated to me yourself the circumstances in which you and your lady were set upon. Unconventional, to put it in polite terms. I have given you my word that investigations will be made. I thank you to leave now. Good evening." Billy came out with his head down and did not look up or acknowledge me once. "Where is she?" The question was directed at Mr. Antrobus. "I'm sorry, Billy. I don't know if there is anything that can be done for her. It doesn't look good. A very good physician, perhaps?" "No, not gentle Henry," I retched, spilling sour bile into the gutter. It was a cruel joke, surely. When Billy spoke, his voice was knives. "I thank you, Antrobus. I will reimburse you for your assistance this evening, and please do me one further favour. Tell him to stay away from me." He lifted his hat and strode away. Mr. Antrobus looked bewildered, opening and closing his mouth and making no sound. "What happened to Henry, Mr. Antrobus?" I was dizzy and confused. We stumbled along the street until we found a coffee house, and we sat.
It's Taffy Thomas reading The Imaginary Lives of James Pornicky by Tina Makareti. Another episode tomorrow at 11:15 on The Reading. Nearly 11 after RNZ's news bulletin. Rod Oram is in with business news. About 25 past 11 we will learn more about hydrogen vehicles. Industry leaders Hyundai and Toyota believing hydrogen has a big role to play in decarbonising the transport fleet. What is feasible here? Dr. Richard Mead is with us. And media commentary also in the next hour on 9 to noon.
RNZ News at 11. Good morning, I'm Nicola Wright. A witness to a fatal crash in Christchurch this morning says the cars colliding was the most horrendous sound she's ever heard. The police say a car with 5 people inside failed to stop on Papanui Road about 4 o'clock, and they pursued it for 4 minutes. It crashed into another car at the intersection of Glandovi and Idris Roads, and the driver of that car has died in hospital. A Fendleton resident, Sandra Francis, says she was awoken by the sound of sirens.
First thing I heard were sirens, and then the most horrendous bang I've ever heard. And I just yelled out to my husband, let's go and see if we can be of any help. And we weren't, of course, because the police were here so quickly because they were chasing them. So they're right on their tail.
The roads have now reopened. A police news conference is getting underway. The Police Association says a crackdown on gangs in Wairoa in recent months But the police union says there's no way officers will back down because people in the Hawke's Bay town should not have to put up with threats from gangs. The police earlier this year brought together local leaders, iwi and gangs to address the behaviour of a few individuals. A lawyer whose client had her meth-dealing sentence reduced says the punishment now reflects the crime. A Court of Appeal ruling means judges must now consider whether a dealer's addiction or background fuelled their offending. The barrister, Maria Pekotic, says that meant her client got the maximum discount of 30% from her sentence.
The Court of Appeal decision recognised the fact that she was not a main player in the offending, that she was in love with the person that she offended with, and also had a severe drug addiction. And that drug addiction was brought about by a very traumatic event in her life.
Maria Pekotic says it's refreshing to see the court acknowledge the previous sentencing regime was too harsh. The Mayor of Tauranga says a new councillor who called the Treaty of Waitangi a joke will not be able to take part in discussions involving iwi. While Andrew Hollis was campaigning, he also said the treaty was past.
I'll just sort of look randomly around, so yeah. I won't try and pick one particular. Everyone, you just give me the thumbs up when you're good to go. No one's doing live, are they?
We are all live.
Well, it's just been... no pressure.
So, no swear words. Everyone all good?
Pretty much, yeah.
We're all happy.
All good? Good morning, Lane Todd's my name, Superintendent, Metro Commander for Christchurch. As you will be aware, police have responded to a serious fleeing driver incident earlier this morning in Christchurch, in which unfortunately one person has died. At 4 a.m, a Toyota with 5 occupants fled from police on Papanui Road after being signalled to stop due to concerns with the manner of driving. The Toyota was followed by police for approximately 4 minutes before it crashed into a vehicle being driven by a member of the public at 4:04 a.m. this morning. The crash occurred at the intersection of Glendovi and Idris Roads, Christchurch. The driver and sole occupant of the second vehicle was transported to Christchurch Hospital with critical injuries and unfortunately died soon after. Police have visited his family and are offering support at this horrendous time. The 5 occupants of the Toyota have all sustained injuries, with one currently in a critical condition. This incident is an absolute tragedy, and our thoughts are with the family of the man who has died and with those who are injured. Every day, our staff come to work to protect the community and keep them safe. That this event has occurred is devastating, and the staff involved are being supported at this time. The full circumstances of this incident will now be fully investigated. The serious crash unit are currently at the scene gathering evidence and are undertaking examinations. That work will assist the police investigation, which is now currently underway. The incident has also been referred to the Independent Police Conduct Authority, who will undertake an independent investigation. Once again, I offer my condolences to the family of the man that has died, and our thoughts remain with those involved. I'm here to take any questions.
Was the officer involved asked to abandon the pursuit at any time?
The exact nature of the fleeing driver incident is being reviewed, and obviously that's part of the wider investigation. So it's too early for us to determine exactly the circumstances in relation to that at this time.
Was the officer, did they have a gold star certification?
Yes.
So you can't say whether the police called off the pursuit before the crash happened?
The pursuit was still active at the time of the crash, but obviously the circumstances leading up to the crash will be part of that wider investigation.
So you can't say why you didn't call it off earlier?
The pursuit itself in relation to the exact circumstances are being reviewed, and that will also be our investigation, but also matter for the Independent Police Conduct Authority.
How fast was the fleeing vehicle going?
Those are all matters that we'll be obviously looking at as part of the investigation. What I would say is then they weren't horrendous speeds, but they obviously were over the speed limit.
Was the car stolen, or are you aware of this?
At this stage, it doesn't appear the vehicle was stolen.
And the car was driving in a manner that the officer thought they should pick them over. What sort of manner were they driving in?
The exact nature of that will be part of the investigation, but the officers have reported that the nature of the driving, it was erratic, and they were concerned around the manner of the driving, which is why they obviously had intended to stop and talk with the driver, and then the pursuit was initiated after that when the vehicle failed to stop. There was one, what we call a primary unit, which was the main vehicle, and then an acting sergeant became involved not long before the crash occurred.
We know where the crash occurred, but do you know where they were told to stop originally, where it started from, the pursuit?
In Papanui Road is where the pursuit originally started.
And do we know what licence the driver had that was fleeing? Do you have a full licence?
Those matters are still part of the wider investigation.
Do you know the route that they took? You mentioned there was residential streets, so you're aware of the exact route that they took?
Yeah, but we won't be releasing the exact details of that at this early stage. That's part of the wider investigation. Other than the pursuit was initiated in Papanui Road and ended where the crash was and took just over 4 minutes.
What is a gold star certification?
That's obviously part of our training that the officers do, but it's also, so there's criteria they have to meet to do that, and all our frontline officers have that gold standard, but there's also an element with the vehicle as well, the police vehicle, which means it's marked and has all the relevant emergency lights and sirens, etc. associated with it.
We've had a number of spotlights being on police pursuits in Christchurch. Is this something that you're concerned about, that people don't seem to be pulling over?
Obviously, it is a concern for us, and especially one with this nature where unfortunately someone has died. But what I would say is the Independent Police Conduct Authority and police conducted a joint review, which those outcomes were released in March, and so there's some work on for that police are currently working through. But our staff are fully trained. Unfortunately, with these matters, when they end in a person dying, it's horrific for everyone involved, in particular with the family.
What sort of changes have Canterbury Police made after that review?
Well, there's additional training that's occurred, but also we fall in with the national review that some of those outcomes that were being worked through at the moment. But in terms of the policy itself, we obviously work closely with the Independent Police Conduct on that as well.
Do you know how has that changed? What's actually changed in terms of when you decide to pursue somebody from March to now?
I'm going to have to refer to my notes on that one. Okay, sorry, just ask me the question again.
So what has actually changed between March, that review was known, and now?
Okay, so additional training has been put in place, but also there's a higher reliance on what we call as the 10R risk assessment that the officers have to go through. So that's our threat exposure, necessity to respond, and then the response itself. So there's a lot more training and oversight of that particular process.
Is that process being used at the police pursuit in New Brighton, which resulted in a fatality?
Well, that matter's still under investigation in terms of with the IPCO, so I won't discuss the outcomes of that one.
But the officers involved in that pursuit would have been aware of the outcome
Yes.
from March, so they were also using that.
Yes.
Approach.
Yes.
Right. Are you concerned that at least in these two incidents, maybe the review isn't working?
Well, I mean, it's too early to discuss the exact nature of this one from this morning, but obviously there's 3 investigations really underway. So there's obviously the police investigation, there's the Independent Police Conduct Authority, which is independent, and then we also look at our policies, practices and procedures. So between those 3, without preempting what the outcome's going to be, we'll obviously look at those results and then look at what action or outcomes need to come out of that.
Is the driver of the car being pursued this morning held and charged?
Not as yet. Obviously the investigation's ongoing this morning and will continue for several days, and it's too early for us to discuss what that may or may not be looking like.
Are they in custody?
We're talking with them at the moment.
What's the status of those that were involved in the crash of the Toyota?
One's critical and the rest are what we call status 2. So I haven't got an update in terms of whether they've been released from hospital yet or not. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
You could do the long walk. We would like the pictures.
Is net zero emissions, and then it sets up the framework that's incredibly important. The most important part of the process is to establish an independent climate change commission. So the commission would be reviewing. Sorry, here's one thing I'm not clear of yet: whether the 5-year carbon budgets that get us to that those long-term